King Charles has done the unthinkable. He toppled Prime Minister Keir Starmer by dissolving Parliament, hurling the country into the most turbulent general election in living memory. The monarchy has unleashed a political earthquake, and the aftershocks are already surging across the nation. Streets are swelling with demonstrations, trading floors are collapsing into panic, and constitutional scholars are calling this the most reckless gamble by a sovereign in nearly 2 centuries. What follows could either rescue Britain from political ruin or shatter the monarchy forever. The shock struck with breathtaking speed. For weeks, whispers drifted through Buckingham Palace about Charles consulting legal experts, but few believed he would ever dare act. Tonight that hesitation evaporated. With a single royal decree, King Charles dismissed Parliament, bypassing Starmer's government and forcing the political establishment into an election they were desperate to escape. The move stunned Westminster. MPs erupted in rage, branding the king a despot and warning of democratic collapse. Yet on the streets, the mood was the opposite. Crowds outside Downing Street burst into chants of Charles, 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 while Union Jacks waved like a revolution had begun for many ordinary Britons. Exhausted by years of soaring costs, mass migration, collapsing services, and a parliament they no longer trusted, this wasn't seen as a coup but salvation. Starmer's position now lies in ruins. Only yesterday his administration forced through a controversial package of policies that critics said lined MPs' pockets while families struggled to heat their homes. Approval ratings were already collapsing, but nobody imagined the king himself would intervene. Charles's decree instantly stripped Starmer of authority. Cabinet ministers reportedly screamed at each other in emergency meetings, unable to decide whether to challenge the king in court or prepare for elections. One senior MP leaked that Westminster had fallen into complete turmoil. Nobody knows what comes next. Markets reacted violently within minutes. The pound dropped 4% in late trading, while government bond yields spiked to levels unseen since the financial crash. Traders in New York and Tokyo scrambled to abandon British assets, fearing the monarchy's intervention signaled a breakdown in political order. Yet in the Midlands and North, where resentment toward Westminster has been simmering for years, celebrations spread like wildfire. Social media erupted with videos of working-class Britons cheering the king's decision, declaring that finally someone had stood up for the people. The hashtag King Crushes Starmer hit 20 million posts in under an hour. But this triumph comes at a terrifying cost. Constitutional lawyers are warning that Charles has crossed into uncharted territory. While the royal prerogative technically allows a monarch to dissolve Parliament, no king has wielded it against the will of a sitting prime minister since 1834. Critics argue Charles has shredded centuries of political neutrality in one blow, exposing the monarchy to accusations of authoritarianism. Some MPs openly call for abolishing the crown altogether. Others warn this could ignite a constitutional crisis worse than the English Civil War. Inside Buckingham Palace, sources describe a scene of grim determination. Charles, reportedly pale but resolute, told advisers that the people have been betrayed and I cannot stand by. Younger members of his circle urged bold action, insisting the monarchy must prove it still has purpose in the 21st century. But traditional courtiers, horrified, cautioned that this choice may end the monarchy itself. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who only weeks ago called for wisdom, is said to be torn, understanding the desperation of ordinary families but fearing the spiritual consequences of royal intervention in politics. For now, Britain stands at a crossroads. The king's gamble has broken the political deadlock and handed the people a voice through fresh elections. But at what price? Starmer's allies are already plotting revenge. Legal challenges are being prepared, and whispers of a Republican movement grow louder by the hour. This is not just an election. It is a battle for the very survival of Britain's democracy and monarchy. The scale of turmoil unfolding across the nation is almost impossible to comprehend. Within an hour of the king's decree, Starmer's government was effectively paralyzed. Ministers who only yesterday wielded near absolute power found themselves stripped of authority, reduced to passengers on a runaway train they no longer controlled. Parliament, once the beating heart of Britain's democracy, now lies dissolved, its power shattered by the stroke of a royal pen. The shockwaves are not confined to Westminster. Across the nation, cities are convulsing with unrest. In Manchester, Birmingham, and Cardiff, thousands poured into the streets, some waving royal banners in jubilation, others carrying placards demanding no king, no crown. The atmosphere is electric, volatile, and unpredictable. Britain has become a nation split overnight, divided between those who see Charles as a savior and those who brand him a tyrant. In London, scenes outside Westminster descended into mayhem. Crowds clashed with police as chants of election now echoed through Parliament Square. Some protesters carried signs declaring Charles saves Britain, while others screamed accusations of dictatorship. Riot police, unprepared for the scale of unrest, struggled to contain the surging crowds. Inside Whitehall, Starmer convened what may be his final cabinet meeting, described by insiders as a room of despair. Leaks suggest heated arguments broke out, with some ministers demanding a court challenge, while others admitted they had no choice but to prepare for elections. One minister was overheard muttering, "This is the end, Starmer has lost everything." Financial markets continue to spiral. Overnight trading saw the pound sink to its lowest level in decades, wiping billions off Britain's economic standing. The FTSE collapsed 9% before circuit breakers halted trading. International investors are abandoning British bonds, and the Bank of England is reportedly preparing emergency measures to stabilize the system. Economists warn of a looming financial crisis that could dwarf Brexit in its impact. Yet for millions of ordinary Britons, the panic of traders feels irrelevant compared to the relief of finally seeing Westminster held to account. As one demonstrator in Newcastle told reporters, "I've lost my job, my bills have doubled, and Parliament did nothing. If the King has to rescue us, so be it." International responses are equally explosive. The White House issued a late-night statement urging respect for democratic institutions, while European leaders convened emergency meetings to address Britain's sudden instability. Germany's chancellor voiced deep concern over the precedent being set, while France's president bluntly warned that monarchs meddling in democracy belongs to the 19th century, not the 21st. Yet across parts of the Commonwealth, the King's gamble is watched with fascination. In Australia, some politicians argue Charles's action proves the monarchy can still serve as a safeguard against corrupt parliaments. In Canada, however, critics warn it may fuel Republican sentiment and demands to cut ties with the crown. Social media has turned the crisis into a digital battlefield. Independent creators dominate the narrative, pumping out videos explaining the king's powers and portraying him as the only leader willing to stand with the people. Hashtags like #GeneralElectionNow and #CharlesTheBold trend alongside #AbolishTheMonarchy in a furious clash of competing visions for Britain's future. TikTok videos of jubilant crowds singing "God Save the King" are countered by viral clips of young Republicans burning Union Jacks. The split is stark, generational, and geographic. Polling conducted within hours of the decree shows 52% support for the King's decision nationwide, but in London that figure drops below 40%. In the North and Midlands, backing soars above 70%. Behind the scenes, the monarchy itself is fracturing. Senior courtiers are horrified, fearing the king has sacrificed the institution's carefully maintained neutrality. Some warn the crown may never recover, even if the public approves dissolution. Younger advisors, however, argue that inaction would have been fatal, that the monarchy must prove it is not just ceremonial decoration but a living safeguard of the people's will. Reports suggest Prince William has privately supported his father's decision, though insiders admit family tensions are rising. The Queen, according to leaks, is deeply uneasy, fearing the King's move could trigger calls for a referendum on abolishing the monarchy altogether. The legal storm is only beginning. Constitutional lawyers are lining up on both sides of the debate, preparing for what could become the most significant Supreme Court case in British history. The first dawn after King Charles's shocking decree revealed a nation on edge. What began as jubilation and outrage in the streets has hardened into something more dangerous, a battle for legitimacy. With Parliament dissolved, Starmer clings to what remains of his crumbling authority, insisting the king acted illegally. His speech outside Downing Street, delivered to a jeering crowd, branded the monarch's intervention a coup against the will of the people's elected representatives. Yet the irony was lost on few observers. Starmer, whose government had seen approval ratings plunge below 20%, now claims to speak for a public that has already abandoned him. His words were drowned out by chants of election as protesters surged against police barriers.
For the first time in modern memory, the Prime Minister appears powerless, overshadowed and humiliated by the Crown.
Inside Westminster, chaos reigns.
The chamber is silent, its authority stripped. MPs wander like ghosts, uncertain whether to resist or campaign for survival in the election now thrust upon them. Some Labour backbenchers openly admit Starmer's leadership is finished, whispering about succession battles even as the vote looms. Conservative figures, battered from years of scandal, sense opportunity but remain fractured and rudderless. Smaller parties smell blood, preparing to seize seats in constituencies where disillusionment with the two-party system has reached boiling point. Political analysts describe the moment as the death of business-as-usual politics. Britain's electoral map could be redrawn entirely in the chaos. But the real drama is unfolding outside the political bubble. Across Britain, ordinary citizens are mobilizing as if preparing for war.
Communities battered by years of austerity and neglect view the King's intervention as a once-in-a-lifetime chance to sweep out the elites.
In Sunderland, a retired steelworker told reporters, "We've been ignored for decades. Parliament didn't listen.
If the King forces them to face us in an election, then God bless him." In contrast, in London universities, protests denounce the monarchy as authoritarian, with students chanting "No crown, no chains" and demanding a republic.
Britain is splitting along class, regional, and generational lines, each side convinced history is on their side. The media landscape mirrors the divide. Traditional outlets like the BBC, The Times, and The Guardian thunder warnings of constitutional vandalism and royal dictatorship. Editorials call on Starmer to resist and for Parliament to reassert itself. But their influence is crumbling.
Independent online creators are shaping public opinion faster than legacy outlets can respond.
YouTube channels analyzing royal prerogatives gain millions of views overnight.
TikTok clips of jubilant crowds cheering the King rack up tens of millions more.
Hashtags like election uprising and Charles vs. Starmer dominate global trending lists. The people no longer wait for the morning paper. They are living this revolution in real time on their phones.
Internationally, Britain's gamble has set diplomatic alarm bells ringing. European Union leaders warn of instability spilling across borders, while NATO officials scramble to reassure allies that Britain's institutions remain intact. The White House privately fears Charles's intervention may embolden populist movements in America itself, proving that established systems can be shattered by bold, defiant action. In the Commonwealth, reactions split along familiar lines. Canadian Republicans demand a referendum to cut ties with the monarchy, while some Australian politicians argue the King has shown exactly why the Crown still matters as a constitutional safeguard. Global investors, however, see only danger. Credit rating agencies threaten to downgrade Britain's debt, and the IMF has placed the UK on its crisis watch list.
The monarchy itself is now trapped in an existential gamble.
Supporters hail Charles as the king who saved Britain, while critics mutter darkly about the monarch who destroyed democracy. Inside Buckingham Palace, sources say tension has reached unbearable levels. Senior courtiers, horrified by the backlash, argue the king has gone beyond repair. Younger advisors counter that neutrality was already a dead shield, that a monarchy doing nothing while its people suffer is worse than irrelevant. Prince William, heir to the throne, is said to be preparing a statement, though whether he supports his father or distances himself remains unknown. Even the Archbishop of Canterbury, once cautious, now reportedly warns privately that the crown cannot remain idle while the nation fractures.
As the dust settles, one question dominates: what comes next?
The election clock has begun ticking, but the path ahead is shrouded in uncertainty. The general campaign has burst into life, but instead of restoring order, it has unleashed an even deeper storm. Britain now resembles a country at war with itself. Streets are alive with rallies, party leaders scramble for survival, and the monarchy stands at the center like a lightning rod. From the moment King Charles announced dissolution, politics as we knew it disintegrated.
Keir Starmer, desperate to regain control, declared his Labour Party would fight to defend democracy from royal interference, but the words fell flat.